So welcome to another non-programming lecture for the week. We'll talk about a few things: freedom of speech, communication, open source, lots of weird stuff, but they kind of go together. So let's go right on into it. Let's talk about freedom of speech on the internet, because as at least U.S. citizens, right, we have this right. Does it translate onto the internet? It's a different kind of place, right? It's not like a physical place where we're shouting. It's a virtual place. So do we have a right to freedom of speech on the internet like we do in the open, in real life, in a room somewhere? So pretty much the answer is yes, with reservations, more or less. The answer is pretty much yes. There have been a lot of censorship laws. That's like the thing that prohibits freedom of speech, right? There's been a lot of censorship laws that have been passed since the internet got created, just to try to keep it a little more safe for people. The arguments were usually like, because children could go on the internet, we want to censor these things that they could eventually see somehow. Okay, so that's there's been laws like that passed, but a lot have been thrown out in court because freedom of speech is more or less tolerated even on the internet today. So that's great. Anonymity. Another thing about freedom of speech is that you don't have to attach your name to something. So anonymity, which is something we've talked about a little bit already, is generally, for the most part, protected on the internet as well. You don't have to attach your name to everything you say. That's not true in some countries, which is interesting. But yeah, let's zoom into these ideas and talk about them a little bit. Let's start with censorship. That's something that I think we can all understand. It's just prohibiting stuff. So I'll try and give you some examples of the equivalent of getting rid of things, blacking out stuff, burning books on the internet. All right, so let's figure this out. It is possible to censor pieces of the internet, pieces that you would normally go to, and so countries have historically done this kind of thing. So let's pick on China for this slide. China has banned a lot of Western websites like Facebook, Wikipedia, Google. If you go to China and you don't know how to use a VPN, you cannot access any of these websites. Okay, that's interesting to think about. There used to be a Google in China, and it was allowed up until 2010, but what happened, and it followed Chinese law up until 2010, and what that means is anything that the government didn't want people seeing in their search results didn't get shown to them. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's censorship at the level of the search engine, which is usually when you Google stuff, that's how you find things, right? And so if it's not showing up in the Google search, you're not really getting access to it. So anything that China wanted taken down, got taken down. So that's interesting to think about. And I'm sure that's happening in the U.S. too. We just don't hear about it. But governments have this ability. They can be like, all right, you're running this website in my country. You have your servers here. You better do exactly as I tell you to do with this particular search term. Don't let anything come up. Stuff like that. So that's weird that happened. But I guess the reason Google was there for so long is, one, they probably wanted money, and then also they thought their argument was some access is better than no access, right? So still people can search for stuff and get information, and that's maybe worth it. But eventually they pulled out, and I don't think Google.cn exists anymore because it's banned anyway. But there used to be a Google.hk because Hong Kong, that's what HK stands for. Hong Kong had a little bit more privileges than mainland China, but that's not really a thing anymore, I don't think, either. I'll have to search for this. I'm not sure if this exists because Hong Kong is now with the rest of China, I think. I don't know too much about Chinese politics, but that's something that a government could do. It could take stuff off the internet in the one place you're probably going to find it, which is a search engine result. Okay? Any questions about that? Weird to think about. Comments, concerns. Who knows if the U.S. is doing this? We're not getting shown these things. You can also, as a government, a lot of time, you can shut down the whole internet too. So countries, I don't think the U.S. has done this, but other countries have shut down the entire internet in response to certain events like protests, things like that. And the reason they can do this, probably the reason this is not really happening in the U.S. is like there's a bunch of different companies controlling access to the internet, but some governments have control over the entire internet. So the governments themselves are the internet provider, so they have access to the infrastructure that supplies the internet. To infrastructure. So if you have that kind of control, you can just shut off the internet, unplug the pipes. So that's a thing. Here are two examples that are almost a decade old, over a decade old for this one. Back in 2011, there was that Arab Spring. You remember that? The Egyptian Revolution was a piece of that, and the government of Egypt, they shut down the whole internet for a little while, because that is how everybody was like getting together and organizing like where they're going to go protest next. Okay, so that's crazy to have that kind of control and shut down just information for everybody. You have to find another way to organize, to get information into your brain. And then in a little bit more recently, in 2016, there was that coup in Turkey, and for a little while, the country of Turkey blocked not the entire internet, but certain websites, certain Western websites that were being used to organize, because these are all social media kinds of websites, and people were using those particular websites. People were using social media in Turkey there to organize. So that's crazy. Again, to have that kind of control, you can shut down the entire internet or selectively shut down a few websites for a certain amount of time, just because your citizens aren't doing what you'd like them to do. So weird. Hopefully it never happens here, but that is a thing. Okay. What else? And I don't know if I mentioned this, but like the U.S., we considered banning Chinese websites because China was banning our websites. We considered banning TikTok for a while, right? And so that's a thing that could have happened. Who knows? So yeah, that's censorship for the most part. Questions, ideas about that. So the internet can be censored. It has been censored, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view. If we're good, let's next talk about anonymity. Should people be allowed to be anonymous on the internet and not have to like attach their name and social security number to every comment that they write? So we maybe have some ideas about this, but here are some anecdotes. So, all right, here is something about satellite map data. Just like Germany didn't like, we talked about Germany not liking Street View. South Korea wanted to hide their president's house. It's called the Blue House. Just like ours is the White House. It's kind of cute. They wanted to hide the presidential house and their major power plants and military installations, like pictures of all those things and like addresses of all those things. They wanted that not shown on like Google Maps, for example, right? For safety purposes, because South Korea is right next to North Korea, which is in range of missiles and things. So they thought it would be better to just not have this stuff shown on like Google Maps for anybody to see and go to, or maybe like figure out the GPS coordinates for so easily and like plan an airstrike or something. Who knows? So for safety purposes, they wanted to hide those things, and that is a question of anonymity, isn't it? Should these things that you could see from a satellite, should they be grayed out? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? I guess technically, Google listened on the normal Street View, on the normal like Google Maps view. The president's house is not visible there, but it is visible on the satellite view. So I don't know. That was like a give and take that they did there. But should people be allowed to do this? This is data that should be public in theory. Is it okay to get rid of it? So let's ask our boys. What would Kant say? What would Mill say to all these things? Is it okay to hide your house on the internet? Important things for your own safety. So Kant is a big proponent of individual liberties, right? Don't use people as means to an end, do the right thing. So he would probably say, yeah, totally. If I would want to hide my own house, I should be allowed to, and you can too. It's okay to not have to be shown publicly. It's okay to hide your president's house or your own house. It's okay to hide yourself. And I think you can do that for Street View. I've never tried it, but you can hide your own address from Street View if you wanted to. Maybe you have to prove that you own that house or something. Who knows? But I think Kant would be a proponent of anonymity, being able to hide whatever you want hidden, not having everything need to be public all the time. And then Mill, a utilitarian, would have to weigh things. You could argue yes or no, I think, as a utilitarian. You could be like, yes, I think that it's fine to hide people because, like, safety purposes are important. Like, you don't want like, the power to get shut down because somebody could easily find where the power plant was. Something like that. That would influence a lot of people's utility, right? Power is literally a utility. We call it that. But then you could also, on the flip side, easily argue, no, we should keep these things. Public data should remain public for, like, tourism purposes. South Korea maybe makes a lot of money in tourism, and so it should keep all that stuff shown so that the tourists can find the things easily. That's where they wanted to go anyway. So you could argue either way, but you gotta weigh it and come up with some good arguments. Okay, so that's one piece of anonymity, one idea. You good with that one? I'm talking about a bunch of different countries that aren't the U.S., so we should probably talk about the U.S. for a while, because I don't fully understand all that. Different kind of culture. Back in the day, like, the first piece of anonymity in the U.S.'s history, I would say, was when it was first getting started, and we were trying to, like, make the Constitution and all that. So the Federalist Papers, if you've heard of those, if you remember them, they were written by a group of 3 people, the Founding Fathers, right? And they were published anonymously. So anonymous publications have deep roots in our history, right? They were published anonymously, these Federalist Papers, and it's still like a game of, like, trying to figure out. People are using AI to figure out, like, which of the Federalist Papers were written by which of these people, because they didn't attach their names to it. And so we think we have a good idea, but we're still not perfectly sure. But they were published anonymously, and the reason that they published those papers anonymously back then is because they were so well known. Like, they were popular back then too, just like they are now. And so they wanted to, like, associate the papers with the idea. Like, they wanted to be judged on the strength of their ideas rather than the weight of their name by attaching it. So that's pretty nice, pretty cool, pretty noble, I guess. It was also just a custom at the time to, like, publish things anonymously. That was just a normal thing to do. And so that is a piece of history. That's pretty cool. And so we've got that kind of ingrained in maybe the structure of our laws. So also, in a worse note, I guess, women did not generally write books. It was frowned upon for that to happen back in the day. So a lot of writers used pseudonyms. The first one that comes to my mind, like, maybe you read, like, Jane Eyre or something in high school. Charlotte Bronte, I think, she used a pen name. And it was a male-sounding name, sadly. And so a lot of people did not publish under their own name for one reason or another. Okay? So that's pretty cool. So that maybe is giving a good argument for anonymity anywhere in the U.S., including on the internet. And so that's a good thing. But let me show you the flip side of that. Let me show you a fun website that you can go look up, depending on when you were born, either yourself or maybe your parents if they were born in the U.S. or in California. It's called CaliforniaBirthIndex.org. So please try going there. You say CaliforniaBirthIndex.org, and it takes you to the search place. Please try going there. It's going to be very, very interesting. So the idea is that somebody made this website, and they took a bunch of public data to make it. It has the birth records of everybody born between 1905 and 1995 in California. So, like, if your parents were born in California during that time, of course, they would definitely, hopefully. If they were born in California, they'll probably be on here. All right? So you can search for them. And this is a lot of information that you didn't know was on the internet, probably, if you've never seen this website before. So, I don't know. Let's look up somebody famous that was born in California. Let's look up Phoebe Bridgers, for example. And so let's see what kind of information is associated with everybody who was ever born in California within this time frame. Okay, so there's only one person with that name, otherwise it would like show you the options, but like, all right, there's her middle name, there's her birthday, she was born in this county, her father's last name is Bridges, which makes sense, and her mother's maiden name was this. So, all right, of course she's very famous now, all this information is public, but back in the day, on her Wikipedia page, like, it wasn't like published anywhere that her mother's maiden name was that, so that was like extra information that was just out there, just sitting there. Is this okay? Crazy. And it will also tell you likely people who are related too. If you look up somebody in like your family, it'll show you if they have siblings. Phoebe has a younger brother, but he was born after 95, so he's not on here. But it would be like likely siblings list. Like I'm on here. Probably your parents are too. So like weird. Is this okay to store this kind of information on the internet and have it available to everybody to see? What do you guys think? Is this okay? Is this allowed? This was kind of like against our anonymity. This is California only, by the way. Just us. Weird. Does this make you feel uneasy? Well, maybe it's not your data, but still. This kind of stuff is available for anybody to see. And like a lot of people's like your mother's maiden name is a nice like two-factor verification kind of question, right? You can just go to this website and look up your parents' mother's maiden name. And like maybe that will get them into one of their accounts if you like click forgot password or something. So that is worrisome. Yes? So hopefully that worries you too. Or at least starts making you think. So that's one thing. That's the kind of information that's in the public domain in the US. Anybody can access it. Is that okay? Think about that. On the flip side, let's continue and talk about a different country again. Let's go to www.hitta.se. So Hitta it means find. It's a Swedish website. .se stands for Sweden. And so this is a Swedish website that's very similar to CaliforniaBirthIndex.org, but worse. It has significantly more information. And so if you go here and you search for somebody, and let's agree to all of their cookies, because why not? You can search for somebody on their little search bar, and like the equivalent of John Smith in Sweden, like the most common name is Lars Anderson. So let's search for all the Lars Andersons on this website. Whee! You can also apparently search for phone numbers. So let's look at all the Larses and click on them, and let's see what kind of information goes with each of them. It's like here's a bunch of Larses. Scroll down, who knows? But let's click on this guy, Lars Anderson. So we got, for Mr. Anderson, we've got where he lives on a map. We've got his phone number with 2 digits missing, which of course you could probably just try them all one day if you really wanted it and guess. Got the address. You've got, let's see, something about his work. What else? Oh, here we go. Cool. His birthday's in 6 months. Happy birthday, almost. 180 days. Apparently, you have a name day as well in Sweden. Let's see what else. He lives at this address with this person. Has the same last name. Maybe that's Lars's wife. You can click on her. Crazy. He got his phone number, almost. Information about all the Larses in the world. And here's another one. Like, all this kind of stuff. It's here. Crazy. He lives with this person. Crazy. All right. So that's a little bit worse, maybe. But that's public domain information. Again, is that okay? Would you want that kind of information made public for you if you lived in Sweden? So hopefully your mind is thinking about something right now. So after I've shown you both of those websites, let's have a bit of a debate now. So my question for you is, should people be allowed to remain anonymous on the internet? Like have their public information shown? Should they have to associate their real full name with all of the comments that they make? Stuff like that. Is anonymity good or bad? and I'd like to ask you to write down at least 2 arguments about this idea. And so please go to the written ice page. I'll have you getting into groups after I clear this out, and I'll give you a stance again. So if you are an even group, remember that you just pick a leader and type something and click submit just click submit when it's blank to get a group number, and then you'll write down some arguments associated with your group. So if you're an even group, you are let's say that you're pro anonymity. That's such a hard word to say. And if you're an odd group, you're against anonymity. So even group anonymity equals good. So come up with some good arguments for why you should remain anonymous on the internet, why it's a good thing. And then if you're an odd group, I want you to argue the opposite. Give me some good reasons why it's not a good thing to have everything on the internet. Why anonymity is bad, and you should associate your name with stuff. You should have public information like this. So, according to your stance, come up with at least 2 good arguments for it, even if that's not what you think. All right. So give that a try and discuss, please. So, what's so good about anonymity? What's so bad about it? Another minute or so to get your ideas down. Five times per year. Alright, that's my timer. Let's see what we're thinking. We come up with some good ideas. Usually, if you're like something equals bad group, usually one good answer is always like criminals, protecting yourself. But let's look at some even groups first. Why is anonymity good? Human rights, that's a good idea, honestly. Don't want anyone to know my information unless I voluntarily give out that information. Yeah, so thank goodness that the European Union started asking, like, requiring people to agree to cookies even. Like, that wasn't a thing. Now they force that on us too in the U.S., which is nice. Some more even groups. Good to protect your private information so someone can't just Google you and find your home number. That'd be nice. Or maybe, like, I don't know, they're fine with that in Sweden. Who knows? Maybe it's a cultural thing. Keep you safe. Yeah. Certain kinds of careers. Yeah, if you're in law enforcement, people might want to retaliate against you or something if you catch some bad person. Who knows? So that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do one more. Let's do the largest even group. Here's some arguments for safety. Yeah, safety helps keep you safe if you remain anonymous. It's funny that probably you could use the word safety to argue the other way too, couldn't you? We'll read that in just a second. I'm sure we had some ideas. And then, yeah, privacy is very important. Nice. So let's look at the odd groups. Anonymity equals bad. Why would it be not so good to have things be anonymous? So, okay, I like this one. I haven't heard this one before. It's a great idea. So, like, if you're trying to get a job or somebody's trying to get a job, they should be allowed to search for you, and everything about you should be public as much as possible, right? Not be able to find certified safe area, like sex offenders have to be on a list somewhere. That's taking away anonymity technically, and that's something that is generally agreed that we like. So that's interesting to think about. That's a great idea. Great thoughts there. Could prevent situations. Yeah, if you were forced to like always attach your full name to something on the internet that you post, it would definitely. Crime is a big thing that you could argue about, and that's usually how laws get passed. It's like we're going to prevent crime by making it less anonymous, making things less anonymous. People would act better because they would know that others can see their actions. I like that one a lot. That's very true, right? I think the worst things come out of people, like when it's just a random username on Reddit or Twitter or something, right? And so if you had to attach your name to something, you'd have to be nicer, because then people could find you in real life and know that you said bad things. That's good. Yeah, it holds you to higher standards. I like that. Those are really good ideas. Let's go to a larger odd group. Let's see. Group 17. Why is anonymity not so good? It's important that investigators, good, yeah. Law enforcement is always a big deal here with this kind of argument. Like, they want to, like, you could have the most evidence if you, like, made things not anonymous all the time. And then, yeah, it's important to keep people in check. Like, the second you, again, like, there are mean people on the internet, and one of the reasons probably that they're mean is that they don't have to associate their name. They feel more powerful because their name isn't there, and they're doing things anonymously. And so if you can take that away, then maybe the internet will be a nicer place. Who knows? So yeah, these are great ideas. Thank you for thinking about this. Are there any questions or comments about any of that now that I've read a few? So this is great. Please do attendance. I will stop that eventually if you haven't already. But yeah, those are great thoughts, great ideas. So if we're good with that, let's move on and let's try and bring this back to computer science in a sense. The internet, of course, is computer science-y, but let's talk about software. Let's talk about open source software. This is like a movement of people. Source, by the way, it's short for source code, which is just the programs that you write. People can see the source code of them. If you make your thing open source, they can get the source code and see exactly how you programmed it. Some things are closed source, like the code that makes this PowerPoint program. That's closed source because Microsoft wants to make money off of it. They don't want to show anybody their code so that people can make it for free and stuff like that. So open source software is when you give away the source code for free. And this is one answer to like what do you do if you live in a world like ours and you don't trust software made by other people, like you think it's spying on you or something, or if you don't want to pay for it, because open source is also free. So yeah, Microsoft Office is a good example. Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Makes Microsoft a lot of money, and so it's closed source. So who knows? Like you make your PowerPoint program. Is it still called PowerPoint.exe? Let's see. It really is PowerPNT.exe. They still call it that. So it's just a file called PowerPNT.exe that you can double click and it runs. But it's just, to us, it's just a black box. Like, you can try and reverse engineer it if you really wanted to, but like the source code isn't available for you to easily, like, if you find a bug in PowerPoint, you can't go and change it yourself or anything, because the source code is not available. It's closed source. That's in stark contrast to things like Firefox, for example. That's an open source web browser. And so if you do find a bug in Firefox, you can go and fix it right now. You can go get to their code. It's in C++, by the way, so you might be able to, if you've taken CSCI 40, be able to fix Firefox. So yeah, there's that. Let's talk about open source software now. So Scratch and Python. So Scratch is the programming language we're using right now, of course, and then Python is the one we're about to learn soon enough. They're both pieces of open source software. And so what that means is, just to spell it all out in words, that means, first of all, they're free. These things are available for free. It's free to go on the Scratch's website and make a program. It's free to download Python and write Python programs. And then all the source code for those things, if you want to build on top of them or make improvements or just even look at what's going on and like learn from it, all the source code for Scratch and for Python is freely available. The only controversial thing is like which open source license is being used for the code, and so that's like a big thing, a big deal in the open source community. So every piece of open source software, just to like make sure nobody like steals your code and then starts selling it, for example, there's always like a law kind of thing, like a legalese document called your source code license, and so some of them are like, they just reuse that. Some of them, like GPL, is like a popular source code license for open source software. And Python's gone through a bunch of different open source licenses for different versions, and so it's just saying, it's spelling out exactly how you can use this free stuff. It's making sure that you can't like sue the Python people if your program is used in a rocket and the rocket blows up or something. Making sure that they're not liable and stuff like that. So you have to worry about that because people like to sue people. But open source just means that it's free. You can look at it. You can make changes. So probably the biggest example of open source software, though we do love Scratch, is the Linux operating system. And so let's talk about that. Hopefully we've maybe heard this term before, a lot of us, if we're taking a computer science class. So Linux was made back in 1991. And it was, and still is, an open source, so the software, the code is freely available. It's an operating system, right? So if you don't know what that word means, like Windows is an operating system, Mac OS is an operating system, iOS is an operating system, Linux is an operating system. What is Windows? It's just like a program where you log in and then you can do stuff. My best definition of operating system is just a program that runs programs. It runs your other programs. A program that runs programs and deals with your hardware and stuff like that. That runs programs. So, yeah, in addition to running programs, it runs programs. Any operating system does this, like Windows included. It manages all your memory, makes sure that everybody plays nicely with each other. Usually, it manages your files. It gives a way for programs to access files and save them, stuff like that. So that's the job of an operating system. Like, I've got all these millions of programs running on my Windows machine right now, and it's Windows' job to keep them all in check and make sure they're all getting some time on the CPU and running and not taking over and all that. So that's the job of an operating system, and so Linux is one of them. And they have a cute mascot that is a penguin. And Linux is so popular. Like, maybe you've never heard of it, but it is the most popular operating system by far. It's used, if you have an Android phone, it has Linux on it. Every website that you go to on the internet is sending you stuff from a Linux server. So like the class website, for example, I have a little Linux server on the cloud somewhere, and you're talking to it every time you take your attendance and do the written ice and stuff. So pretty much because it's free, like you don't have to buy a Windows license, and so everybody installs Linux on their servers, and that's the idea. So our class server is running Ubuntu Linux, if you care. So that is class website. That is Linux in a nutshell. It is very popular, very, very powerful thing, made for free and used so widely. Everybody loves it. So that's one nice thing about open source. What else? To go hand in hand with open source software, to go hand in hand with Linux, this is like the granddaddy of open source. So I'm just giving you a history lesson right now, kind of. It was made by this dude named Richard Stallman back in the 80s came up with the open source software kind of idea, the free software movement. He essentially started, I would say. And GNU is like the corporation, maybe, or just like the foundation that keeps track of a certain bunch of pieces of software that are very important to be run on Linux or any other open source operating system. So it's called GNU. It's an acronym. It stands for GNU's Not Unix, and so it's got itself inside of itself, which is recursion, if you've heard of that word before. It's just a big joke, but it's also, this word is a real word. It stands for, it's pronounced usually new, like with this kind of Spanish N. It's like a wildebeest. But no, they call it GNU with a hard G. So now you know how to pronounce it. But GNU is just like a free software project, and it is used as the backbone of Linux. So like Linux is called the kernel of the operating system. It does all this stuff, but like if you want to do anything on Linux, you have to install some extra tools, and the GNU tools are what people like to use most often. So really, if you want to be very pedantic, and of course Richard Stallman would tell you this, it's not just Linux, it's GNU/Linux. So if anybody says this, you better watch out, because they really care about their free software. If you've taken CSCI 40 already, or if you enjoy this class and I convince you to take CSCI 40, I will force you to use Linux and GNU software there. So it's very important. Like the standard compiler for a lot of programming languages, if you know what that means, is made by the GNU people. So like they are the backbone of so many things, right? So this foundation was founded by Richard Stallman, who has a lot of very interesting quirks to himself and viewpoints. One thing that Stallman thinks is that every program ever should be free, including anything made by Microsoft, and it should have its source code available. So he only uses open source software. He sticks to his guns, which is very, very, very noble of him, I think. So he's a cool guy. Look him up. Got some interesting stuff. He's fluent in Spanish too, which is really cool. So yeah, that's the GNU project and Linux, a bunch of open source pieces of software, which let you do whatever you want. So really cool stuff. And so if we're happy with that, just like a little mini history lesson to show you like people are putting stuff for free on the internet right now. Let's talk about the flip side of that. If people put stuff that is not for free on the internet, and then people are allowed to steal it. So let's talk about intellectual property again, because there's way too much to talk about. There's way too many laws written about it. And just like with law, there's a lot of bugs maybe in the law. It's written in English, so maybe they should write it in logic. It's vague. It's got a bunch of corner cases. Let me show you some ideas that we haven't talked about yet regarding intellectual property and policing things that do cost money, that were made by people, that were like copyrighted on the internet, right? One thing I should say, we should talk about the idea of fair use, all right? Because we're talking about, like, what is the theme of today? Freedom of speech, communicating with people. I guess open source software is like you speaking in code, freedom of speech there. So let's talk about fair use. This is one way that you are allowed to reuse copyrighted works without having to pay. This is like the original idea of like stealing things. So what is fair use? Because it allows you to essentially steal stuff for free. The U.S. and its fair use laws are surprisingly lax. They're pretty utilitarian, I would say, about this. So pretty much the ideas of fair use, if you want to look it up, there's more to it. But essentially, at least in the US, the fair use laws go like this. You can reuse something. It's okay if you reuse something as long as, one, you don't copy too much of it. You can take pieces, it's fine. And then also, your use of it should not keep the creator of the thing, the original thing that you're copying, from making money. So that kind of screams you cannot sell what you're doing. You cannot use something for fair use and then go and sell it because it was somebody else's thing. That's one good example. But as long as you do that, it's fine. So some good examples, one good example, I guess, of fair use. I had a professor do this for me, but if you would like, you can take a book. You can go and scan a book and copy it. Like, I am allowed to, as a teacher, give each and every one of you in this class a copy of a chapter from like a textbook for free. And I don't have to pay anybody, and you don't have to pay anybody. So that's totally an example of fair use. How do you spell excerpt? Excerpts. Has anybody had that happen before in a class? Like chapters of a book given to you for free? Only once did that happen, but that is fair use, technically. Excerpts from a book or a textbook reproduced for students. That is fair use. Because we all know you're not going to buy it anyway. So it checks this box. It's not keeping anybody from making money. And it's just one chapter. It's not the whole book. So that's not a big deal. So you're totally allowed to do that. And that's allowed. That's fair use. You're also allowed to, another good example of fair use is like back in the day when you actually bought music rather than streamed music, like the iTunes store was a thing. When you double click a piece of music that you're thinking about buying, it showed you like a 30-second preview of it. So it is fair use. And people who have YouTube channels as well have to think about this. You're allowed to reproduce like 30 seconds of music for free. Reproduce a short amount. Any more than that, you get a copyright strike on your YouTube video. A short amount of music for free. So if you want to buy it, you can play it for a little while. If you want to review it on your YouTube channel, you can play a little clip of it, and you don't have to pay anybody for licensing fees or anything like that. So that is also fair use. So again, you're not copying too much of it, and you're not selling anything. You're not reselling that clip of the music or something like that. So that's law that exists in the U.S. Take advantage of it. It's very cool, right? But let's figure out, because there's a fine line between fair use and piracy. So here's a game. You guys can just play with your thumbs if you like. Give me a thumbs up if I'm about to show you a bunch of ideas. Do you think if this is piracy or not? You can give me a thumbs down if you don't think it's piracy. So do we think that if you record a TV show that's airing, is that piracy or not? What do you think? Thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you don't. What do you think? So, yeah, nice. We all got the idea. This is a thing. Surprisingly legal back in the day. Most of you probably weren't alive when this was a big deal, but VHS cassette tape things. Tape recorders became popular. You could buy blank tapes, put it in your TV, and have it record the Super Bowl or something when you're somewhere else. So that was huge, and people tried to fight this hard. The broadcasters wanted to fight that really hard, but they won in court. You're allowed to do this because it's you making a backup for yourself. It's totally fine and legal. Yeah, you're just not selling it. That's fine. If it's for you, it's okay. All right. What about this one? Copying old games for let's say the GameCube, because they use little tiny DVDs. Is it okay to copy a GameCube game using a DVD burner onto your computer and you make another copy? Yes or no? Ooh, we're a bit mixed right now. So the question is this fair use or is it piracy? Depends on who you're using this for. If it's for you, it's actually fine. It's a backup. It's just a backup, just like you recording a TV show. It's totally okay. All right? That's surprisingly interesting, right? You're totally allowed to do that. These days, I guess you'd have to copy the SD card or whatever the Switch games are made of. It's a little bit harder when it's on the internet like this, yeah. But all right, what if you give that copy to your friend now? Is that piracy or is it not piracy? There you go. Yeah, so that's the one that's definitely not legal. Not okay. Okay. You can give the original copy to your friend to borrow, but can't give them a copy of the game and have both of you have one at the same time. Then that's not legal. It's not a backup anymore. That is piracy. Your friend should have bought it, and now the person who made that game is not making money. Right. So that's the game between fair use and piracy. A very cool idea that comes out of the idea of you copying your games and making backups is you don't have to make a new DVD of that. You can like put the GameCube game that's yours, you can make a copy of it and put it on the computer. So that leads into a concept called reverse engineering. So just the idea of reverse engineering, by the way, has nothing to do with software. It's just like it's an old idea where it's like taking something apart. That's what reverse engineering means. Taking something apart to see how it's made. And one thing that was made, many things that have been made using reverse engineering are emulators for consoles. Emulator, if you've heard of that or not heard of it. What it does is it's just a software. It's a piece of software that pretends to be a GameCube or pretends to be a Nintendo DS or something that is a bit older. Or even a Switch these days. They have Switch emulators. So what emulators do is they convert hardware, like the old Nintendo 64 or something, to software so that you can play your backed up games on your own computer because that hardware is not being made anymore. So this is surprisingly legal to make emulators for old game consoles as part of reverse engineering, and courts have ruled in favor of this, making like a software copy of like a Nintendo DS or a Switch or something like that. Totally okay. And the viewpoint of the courts is that the main idea, at least what was argued, and this is totally a thing, but most people want to play their own games anyway, but at least as far as the courts were concerned, the purpose of reverse engineering and making these emulators was to use that hardware, or like, because the hardware wasn't being made anymore, like you want to make a new, like a GameCube emulator or something. You're not trying to sell it, you're just trying to make new games or improve old ones, okay? You're not trying to copy the hardware. Every emulator is free, it's forced to be free, because you're not trying to resell like a Nintendo console or something. That would be weird. So that's something that is surprisingly legal. If you back up your own games, like your own GameCube, Wii, Switch games onto your computer, there are emulators that exist that let you run those games on your own computer without the console there, which is kind of interesting. A very popular emulator that's doing some really cool things in the field is called Dolphin. It's an emulator for both the GameCube and the Wii. I don't know if you guys grew up with those. Maybe I should change to a new example, but really, really cool and totally legal, surprisingly. So that's reverse engineering, making emulators and fair use. So just getting you thinking, like, if you were the government, would you agree with these ideas? Do you want these things to still be fair use? Do you like this? Or if you made your own console, do you want people making emulators for it? This is what I want you to think about it. All right. So okay, if we're doing all right, let's talk about another way of like you making something, some creative work, some piece of intellectual property, and then you want to give it away and you want to make sure like people aren't copying it when they shouldn't be copying. This is called DRM, digital rights management, and this is people have some very strong opinions about this. But what DRM is, what digital rights management is just like stuff baked into either hardware or software that lets you control how somebody uses something, how intellectual property in digital formats gets used. You have the control over it. So the idea of DRM is like you're like running a server somewhere, and you have to like ask DRM every time you want to play a song or play a video game. You say, "Hey DRM server, can I use this thing? Am I allowed to?" And it will verify that like, yeah, you bought the thing, you own it, you're allowed to use it. And so it'll either say yes and let you play the game or the movie or the video or the music, or it'll say no and it'll block you from running that thing, which is crazy. So with DRM, the producer of the content can control its use. And so essentially all of your virtual textbooks, I'm sure you've had to get some of those by now, those are all, essentially that's DRM at the end of the day, right? Because you're logging under your account. That's only your textbook. You can't like resell it, stuff like that. So this has caught a lot of flack recently because the original video games, like decades ago, that first started using DRM, like you had to connect to the internet to see if you're allowed to play the game or not. And so nowadays, like those game companies who made those old video games with that kind of DRM, they're getting shut down, like the company's going under. And the video games that they made are now unplayable because those DRM servers that you need to connect to every time you click the game and try to run it, they're now shut down. So that's a very interesting argument that might show up in court one day against DRM. But textbooks I think are a great example for, like we said, you can't resell a virtual textbook. That's somebody taking your rights away. That's DRM. You agreed to it by buying it though. So you can't resell a virtual textbook. And so I'm sorry you have to deal with this as a student. I was like the last generation of students probably that could resell books, because we actually use physical books still, even for computer science. So yeah, that's DRM in a nutshell. Have we played video games that are like this, that need to be connected to the internet in order to even run? That's probably the standard example. So that's one way to control stuff, good or bad. Take your pick. Another thing you can do to software, surprisingly, is patent it. All right. So a patent, like, I don't know, what was the first patent? Like, you learn about this in elementary school or something. It's like the thing that did something like took the cotton from the shell or the seeds or something. But like patents are usually for machines, but you're allowed to patent software these days. So usually patents are for like machines and things, physical things, but should you be allowed, right now you are, should you be allowed to patent software? You can't touch software. It's not a machine. It's not a device. To patent intangible things. It's another question. It's an ethical question. All these are ethical questions, of course. And so, like, is it a good idea to have this? Richard Stallman, of course, would say absolutely not. We should never have this. Everything should be free. But you can take a more utilitarian stance, probably, and try to weigh things. What are some arguments for software patents, patenting software, so that then you can sue somebody if they steal your idea? And that's what patents are for, right? So that's something you can do. What are some arguments for and against using a patent? Like, why would you get one? Why is it okay? Why is it not okay? And maybe that'll tip the scales one way or another. So, like, here's two arguments that I came up with for software patents. Like, an argument for patents is that, well, creators of software, they're getting paid when you buy their software, right? And so if you patent it, that allows those creators, if you allow the ability to patent software, then that means, like, if somebody ever steals it and, like, makes their own version and puts their logo on it, though it's your code and your software, then you can sue them and make a lot of money and win. Okay, that's what patents are for. So that's like a good idea, maybe, along those lines. But then you could also take the flip side, and like you have to make your big long list of pros and cons. Here's one pro and here's one con. What is software but an idea, right? It's just an idea. Like PowerPoint, sure, showing slides, that was around back before the internet existed, before computers existed. You had like physical slide projector things. Why should PowerPoint need to be patented? That's silly. It's just an idea. Anybody should be allowed to recreate an idea and maybe make it better. But then you won't be able to sue people at that point. So I guess maybe it depends on if you've made software or not, how you feel about this. But those are two sides of the same coin. What do you think? So that's to get your mind moving, I would say. Any questions, comments about any of that? So patenting software is a thing right now. Maybe one day it will be illegal. And then the last thing that I want to talk about, in the slides at least, is search engines, because they steal things, right? Search engines steal things, intellectual property, go back to anonymity. Like, they're reproducing things. Anytime you search on Google, for example, you are seeing Google's copy of a bunch of stuff. Google, like when you search for something, you click the little search bar, and it shows you a bunch of articles, right? And it's stolen, essentially, those articles. It's copying them onto Google's own servers and showing you these links and showing you this information. But they're doing it in a fair use style way, right? They're showing you little snippets of what you're looking for. They're not like reproducing the entire New York Times article or something. They're not reproducing the entire Facebook website. That would be way too complicated anyway. They're showing you little snippets of what you're searching for. And so fair use is super important if you want to make a search engine. So that's one reason to have it, I would say. Some firepower. And then, if you haven't heard of this before, DuckDuckGo is a very popular website that is like a competitor to Google. It's completely free, and it's supposed to not track you across the internet, because one thing that search engines do is that like Google tracks you. They show you ads as well for what you're searching for. DuckDuckGo does not do those things. So they make their money in a different way. So, yeah, fair use is important. Now you know about it if you've never heard of it before. But there's a fine line, as we talked about, between fair use and piracy, and DRM is one side of that, patents are another side of that. Yeah, just a lot to talk about. A lot of similar sounding ideas today, a lot of anecdotes. Any questions about any of that? Because I think I need to give you a new essay, right? So, a lot of topics to talk about today, but we got through them. You have an essay due this week, so I need to give you a new essay. And then I'll do a new programming assignment next time, and also I'll talk about, we're going to have a midterm as well. I talked about that at the start of the semester. We're going to eventually have a midterm. That's going to be in week 8. We're in week 6 right now. And so I'll tell you more information about the midterm next time as well. Okay? But for now, here's your new essay, your next essay. Please make a 750-word essay along these lines. Here's your prompt. This is something that is a thing that used to be a thing that's still a thing in certain places, depending on where you travel to. If you are, like, you're working the customs at an airport, like you go to a new country, you have to go through customs, right? So customs officials at airports have, historically, and they still are, they're asking travelers to unlock their phones before people are being allowed into the country. They want to look at your phone. They want you to unlock it and look at it. All right, so I want you to respond to this prompt. What are your thoughts about this practice? Should it be always allowed? Should it always be allowed for people to have to unlock their phones for the customs officials? Should it be never allowed? Or should it be maybe allowed in certain cases? So you've got a bunch of options, but pick an answer and explain your answer. Talk about every side of that argument. Talk about how the yes people would respond, the no people would respond. That's how you argue things. You have to like prop up your side and bash down the other side. So think logically, talk about all the sides, and just respond to this idea, this prompt, in 750 words. And I will have, finally, we have a citation requirement for this essay again. So this time I want you to cite, please, at least 2 sources, remembering not to cite Wikipedia, remembering to put like a parenthetical or some kind of citation in your actual text, and then also a works cited page to talk about, like, reference the thing that you cited. Okay, so like pick a format, but like stick to a real format, please. Don't just put a works cited page and not ever talk about those things that you cited. That's important. But yeah, anything else is fair game. You can find any article you want, as long as it's not citing Wikipedia. Just cite the things that Wikipedia cites. And yeah, that'll be due week 8. So that's going to be March 1st. So any questions about this essay? It'll be 750 words about this topic. 2 sources cited, please. All right, so if you're good with that, let's see. Is there anything else I need to tell you about? So that's the first, that's your new assignment for the week. I'll also give you a new programming assignment, of course, but we'll do that next time, and then I'll also talk about your test next time. So that'll be it for everything I want to say today.